Britain, famous for its tea, royalty and distaste of all things EU. We went to London to find out why it has the reputation of being so very Eurosceptic and why Britain appears so adverse to its continental political cousins.
England is kind of half-hearted about their situation. They want to gain the benefits of Europe, but when it comes to the bad points, they don't want to just suffer that, do you know what I mean?
We kind of have to care about it, so we're all now.
The majority of the people in this country are totally and completely anti-Europe.
I just get on with my life and do my little bit.
Let Europe get on with it.
Eat my chicken. That's what I do.
In a nation of 62 million, there are sure to be some diverging opinions on Europe and how it's reported. To get to the bottom of the matter, we spoke to a former press officer, a professor, and journalists representing pro-Europe and Eurosceptic camps, all of whom seem to have a different definition of British Euroscepticism.
Scepticism is the essence of British journalism. Since the 1980s, we've been lumbered with this term, which covers a whole range of phenomena, starting from outright Europhobia, hostility, to European integration, to Euro boredom.
And down the far end, they're real Europhobes. I mean, they're almost xenophobes, frankly. I mean, they don't like anything that isn't British. But as you come back into the more moderate area, you come into Euroscepticism, and some people would call themselves really Euro-realists.
Euroscepticism in Brussels means something else to people in the institutions. It means people who criticise them, and anyone who criticises them is either a Eurosceptic or a populist.
In the 1970s, Britain voted overwhelmingly in favour of joining the European community. 36 years later, newspapers and Conservative politicians are calling for a referendum on EU membership. The current crisis certainly plays a part, but many blame the media. Fleet Street, the historical heart of the British media. This is where British journalistic tradition was born.
I was talking to a great American investigative reporter the other day, and he was saying, well, you know, what are newspapers for? He said, we're here to make trouble. Well, that's part of the British tradition.
Pen is mightier than the sword. British journalists certainly have razor-sharp beaks.
I've been in Brussels for nearly 9 years. I've worked for about 5 years with The Telegraph. I know the institutions pretty well. I can be very nerdy if I want to be. British journalists are much more aggressive, so we will be quite rude to people, I think. That's what people think we're being, because we're not particularly deferential to, Monsieur le Président or whoever it is.
The market also calls for this aggressive approach. With 10 national newspapers and countless regional sheets all competing for attention, the headlines have to appeal to the right audience. It is the less informed and more popular tabloids who have been at the centre of many Euro myths. The European Commission keeps a list dating back to the 90s, and some of the misunderstandings drive them bananas.
That keeping correspondence abroad is expensive. The tabloids don't find that worthwhile in Brussels, so basically they rely on stringers. Stringers want to sell stories, so stringers exaggerate the story, they will twist, quite rightly from their point of view, they will build on a story, twist it, exaggerate it, pander, if you like, to the line which they think the editor will buy. And of course a bent banana is a lovely story if you're an editor sitting back here in a tabloid, you can't miss it.
Not all the blame can be placed on lazy journalism and market demands. Europe is a strange creature to report. Covering environment one day and finance and foreign policy the next can be demanding.
You have to be a super journalist. Maybe that's one of the reasons why European affairs are covered so badly, because there are not many supermen and superwomen around.
Knowing your EFSF from your CSDP is not as easy as ABC. When it comes to summit time, journalists often simplify matters.
So we tend to do kind of summits as, victory or defeat. It's much more interesting if we trail it as a fight or even a potential defeat on the way.
The latest EU summit proved no exception, with one tabloid using a war reference. The news is not about reporting when everything works well, so for all their faults, perhaps the British press is right to keep a critical eye on an institution that's growing in importance.
It's not in every European country that you can go and find constant headlines, whether good or bad, about Europe. It is a live issue.
Perhaps Oscar Wilde put it best when he said there's only one thing in life worse than being talked about, and that's not being talked about.